Mary gave a talk to I can't tell you how happy I am to see this wonderful room full of friends and locals and friends, local friends. Mary gave a talk to the Religious Studies Board a couple months ago on religion as the handmaiden of the arts. And when she was preparing it, she said, I need about 10 more lectures to really do this. So I said, well, why not? Do it. So we started at 10 and then whittled it down to 3. So that's, in case you were wondering.
Is this a crash course then?
This is the speech, the intensive. This is the intensive. So we thought, on account of it being only 3 out of 10, we'd give it a modest title, like, you know, to the greater glory of God. Mary could give it her best shot. So in case any of you were wondering, what is the occasion? You know, why do we, you know, Four Gates Enterprises, which is a thin veil, send out an invitation and have such an occasion? That was the origin of it. If there ever were an occasion where somebody didn't need an introduction, this is obviously it. However, I would love to give Mary an introduction. However, I think Mary should begin speaking, but I only would love to give her an introduction just to acknowledge how fortunate and grateful we all are to be live at the same time that Mary is here observing the world and commenting on it and reshaping it into wonderful, marvelous things for us. And so the rest of it would be sort of footnotes and stories.
Okay.
Can I interrupt you for a minute? Yep. We have this technical questions first. We have to get.
Yeah. Now, is this a new tape that you just put in?
Yeah. Right.
Is it? I think you've got it running the wrong way.
You push record there?
Yeah, I've got it on
going.
record. Yes, but there appears to be winding onto.
It should be good.
It should be going the other way.
Should it?
Yeah. So where's stop here? Oh.
So, are we ready to
Yes.
fly?
He's my favorite Hasidic rabbi because when he was reading the Torah, he came on the phrase very easily, God spoke. And he was so thrown into an ecstasy that he never could read any farther. God spoke, and I just think it's so marvelous, you know, so marvelous to have to know something is extraordinary when you hear it. I mean, you know, when you see it, it's really. And you think of all the people that have read that far and kept right on. I mean, you know, or who said, "What did he say?" all completely beside the point. I mean, so, but we are really in the extraordinary condition of not knowing what anything is, and this is a pain and anguish to everybody. And all you need to recall is the way people say, you know, is it love? Is it sex? Is it whatever? You know, is this an education? Is this what it is? And there's nobody to answer. There's nobody, or the answers are mostly fatuous, you know. But it's and is it life or is it death? These enormous things people thought they knew, and for the most part did know or found out as well as they could, haunt us all. And I, of course, am particularly in anguish over the number of times that I read something that says something like, "Is it art?" And this is something we've all heard all the time, and you can't pick up anything without reading something about where somebody says, "Well, yes, it's very interesting, and it's something and the other is very, but is it art?" And there's no golden echo, and there's no silver echo to that. There's no answer to it. People really don't know. And then they ask a question like, "Is it art or is it craft?" Well, you see, what are they doing? Of course, the first thing is that people have an enormous fringe of meanings around art, the word art. So if they can say, then, "Is it art?" or "Is this art?" or whatever, any of those things. And this is due to actually, I think, some of you know, I'm practically obsessive on the fact that we cannot use the word art anymore because it has been totally eviscerated. I mean, its insides have been taken out, and people naturally then say, "Is it art?" because they can't possibly tell by anything. And if you read the dictionary, the dictionary definition of art has absolutely nothing to do with art as we know and recognize and care about it or make it or want anything, because it is based on the idea of beauty. It believes, actually, and for this, there's just no end of people who believe this, that it is, first of all, beautiful, second, elevating, and that these, and beyond that, has some kind of great difficulty of craftsmanship. So that these things seem to people to define what art is, and then they see something which is and cannot reconcile it with what they think of as beauty, and then of course there are great numbers of people. I mean, to me, unforgivable numbers of people who think that art has something to do with self-expression. That what the artist does is self-expression. I know this so well because I've many times been introduced to somebody as a painter or as an artist or something like that, and they say, "Oh, you're so lucky because you can express yourself all the time." And because I'm such an absolutely irredeemable didact, I back them into a corner and tell them what's the true word. That this has nothing or has as little to do with self-expression as anything that we as human beings do, and that it is. And if that were what it is, there are two things which prove that it isn't, and one of them is you can express yourself, and in fact you must express yourself. As I say over and over, you cannot express anything else. You're going to do it. You're going to do it the way you sneeze, the way you tie your shoes, and that's why that wonderful Japanese thing that if you live with a great master, watch him tie his shoes. Because it's it's just that we reveal ourselves and we express ourselves in every single thing that we do, the way we eat our breakfast, the way, everything that we do. And of course, it's one of the things that makes it almost impossible for us to live with more than a couple of people in our lifetime, because just the way they eat their cereal. I remember reading about a woman who got a divorce because every time when her husband sat down to breakfast, he did like this with his. And finally she couldn't stand it, Well, it was a kind of don't know what, whether it came from horseback riding or roosters or what, I don't know what it was. But it was just maddening after a few. It was more than if he'd been a serial killer, you know. It was simply more than you could stand to have that happen. And that's and of course the poor soul didn't know, and it couldn't possibly, I think, have controlled it. You can imagine what it was effort to keep his elbows in and keep his wife both. It was very hard to do. But anyway, it is true that the things that we do that do express us and that we are not, we really in a sense can't control, because that's what we are and do, are the things that are painful, can be very painful or very boring, or any number of things. And I'm sorry to say that most of us don't have that sufficient love and fondness to overlook these things. So you're lucky if your mother does. That's a neighbor. So it takes a lot of love to tolerate, for us to tolerate each other or ourselves. I mean, it's very, very difficult. So it isn't what art is about, and it isn't, I think, so much communication, and it certainly isn't beauty. What is it? What is it finally that makes us do it? Well, I think that there's only one answer to that, and that is that we as human beings are made in the image of God, and the great thing that God does, the only thing that you can safely say about God, if you read the creed, or if you know the creed, or if you read anything about God, it is that He is a maker. He makes things. He made the world and all that in it is, and all visible and invisible world. And if you don't have that quality, now it doesn't seem to me to make a lot of difference once it's confronted. If you think of this as a progression of unfolding of the world that God has made, and that we, because we're made in His image, also aspire to make. And this is something that is absolutely species specific. No other species wants to make art, or make anything that is made with that intention, with that kind of intention or desire. There are all kinds of things make all kinds of other things. I mean, this very wonderful way that the wind makes wonderful things by sculpture, and sand and rain and all of these things alter and make extraordinary things. And in fact, this year I had a wonderful cheese in my refrigerator. It was a little block of white Monterey Jack. And I took it out of the refrigerator, perhaps after quite a time. But when I looked at it, it had a little painting on it made by the fungus or the whoever, is making those things out of cheese. It was a little house. It was so marvelous, I could not stand it. It was a little white house. It just, and trees back of it, these little green trees. It isn't like those, people who look up and see a clump of a cloud and say, oh, that's a lion. It wasn't like that at all. This was as if it were done by an English watercolorist, and it was precise and perfectly clear, little pitched roof, and it was white. And then these little bushes around the front, and then tall trees at the back. I just thought, what is this? This is a message from somebody. It was just so marvelous, and I'm sorry to say it got thrown away, because anybody commonly just looking at it, would have thought, my, this Jesus is bad. Had a bad time. but it happens, and it's so extraordinary when it happens. But it is not art; it's just extraordinary. And I remember, actually about 40 years ago, I poured some cream on a chocolate pudding, and there was a little Shetland pony standing there. Brown one, with cream-colored hair and tail, and in a little cream landscape. I just couldn't bear it. And I remembered it now, at least 40 or 50 years, because it was in every detail absolutely perfect. It wasn't anything that you would say, oh, let's see, that looks kind of like this. He was there among a restrained number of vegetation, and there he stood, you see. And these things are amazing, and it was very beautiful. And it was every way marvelous, but it was not art. And why do I dare to say that? I say that because, first of all, we as human beings are art bent. We're bent toward art because we have a great capacity that nobody else, no other species has, and this is a capacity to symbolize. We see something, and we recognize its meaning, and we care about its meaning. And it's always nice just to contemplate that. And you see, now we look at that, we think that's a circle. We think that's what that is, but it only takes putting like one ear on it, and you begin to see it as a living creature, as a cat. And finally, as you put two of them on, and the eyes and the nose, and you put it around, and it's got a tail. But anybody would say that's a cat. They say it's a lousy cat, but it is a cat. I mean, they would not say, is that an elephant? They would not say any of those things. They would recognize that this is a cat. And this, there isn't, and there never has been, a cat in the world that would recognize this. Not that first cat. Still. Now, they can recognize themselves sometimes in mirrors. I know Demi does anyway. But the abstraction from it, the reduction of it to a symbol, is simply our species-specific capacity, and we can do it. And we do it all the time. I mean, we do it. And we have no problem with that, obviously. That's just, we talk, again, how many cats care about that at all? But we do, and we always do, and we always have, and it's been going on forever, that we will make something which has something about art to it, and we will desire it, and we will protect it to a certain extent, and we will care about it. And this is not true of anything, like even birds. Birds make these marvelous constructions for their nests, or even more astounding, like the termites, who make the great cities of buildings, and really they look just like the New York skyline, and they're but they don't have that same protection. They don't care about simply observing it, preserving to observe. And that is what we do all the time. And whether it's some little child will have something that it considers this way a sacred thing of art, something having to do with what they make or what they see or whatever it is. It becomes something of great power, and that is the thing I want you. One of the things that I want you to remember more than anything else that I can ever say, that the making of works of art is the exercise of enormous power, And it's a power over the material world, it's a power over the spiritual world, the knowledge and knowledge and everything else. It's a tremendous power that we have, and it makes our language, and it makes all of our arts and poetry. It makes music, makes everything else. I mean, what's the matter with bird song? Why isn't that musical? I mean, it is musical, but it's not art. It's not an art of music. And part of it is that the great joy that we have, and the great delight and pleasure that we have in art, is that we can judge it. And this is one of our greatest pleasures. I mean, it's one of the great joys that we have of making a judgment on something. Don't you believe all those people that say you shouldn't be judgmental? There's no use in their saying it, because you're going to be judgmental. We are all going to be judgmental, because it's one of the, again, our species' delight is to judge something. To say, why on earth? I mean, you think of the people who walk up and down in cities looking into store windows, and their pleasure is to look. Why, I wouldn't give $5 for that, you see, and it's got a big sign saying that it costs $2,000. And it's a great, wonderful affirmation of yourself to judge something, It is a revelation of your values, and you know that. I mean, you know that what you're doing is making a value judgment. And the joy of that is that it brings together what you believe and what you feel and what you know to be true in terms of values. And this bringing together is marvelously exhilarating. And it costs absolutely nothing. You can have great pleasure from window shopping is just a continuous judgment that has no. It's not really that you're thinking of buying it, or that or anybody you know is going to buy it even. But it just is this wonderful sense in which you affirm what you believe to be good and valuable, and they're affirming something that you consider quite tawdry or very trendy, or something entirely beneath your standard of values. And the grander the thing is, the better, the more fun you have with the judgment, which you can say that about it. And of course, anyone who's ever gone to a movie knows that people coming out always judge the movie. And this is one of the reasons I think that it's difficult to go to a movie by yourself, because you want to come out and say, that was terrible, or how marvelous this was. The whole thing is that you want somebody to hear, and if it's somebody that you're very fond of, it's 1,000 times better, because then they tell you and you tell them, and it's a whole, and you say, oh, wasn't that awful, too bad. And this is a great joy, because it's a great affirmation of what you are, and that's what judgment is, and it always is. Of course, it's why some people are afraid to judge anything. Either they don't want to reveal what they are, or they're afraid to reveal it, or they think that it can't be a good thing. But the other thing, which gives art its power, and which makes us art devoted, not to that word, but to the thing, the making of things, is our capacity to enter into forms and enter into them knowing what they seem to represent. And I'll show you something that always delights me to do. Lots of fun. Some of you may have seen me and heard me do it before. But and let's divide this thing into that. And let me see. if you people came into the room and saw this, and somebody said, was there anything on that piece of paper? They'd say, no, just some scribbles. And yet they cannot help having empathized into these things. If you cannot not do it, and if I said to you that this is a symbol of contentment and ease, quietude, something like the gentle rolling of the sea, and this is how great agitation and anger and has a feeling of urgency and something hurtful. And there isn't a human being who isn't just totally out of it, who wouldn't say, that's wrong. You've got those two things mixed up. There isn't anybody who wouldn't say that. And they would not stand still for 1 minute to believe that this indicated a feeling of repose, quietness. And now part of that is that we go the path of what it took to make sense. We move through that path. And it leaves traces of itself. And this cannot be made. It cannot be made slowly and quietly and easily. I don't think it is possible to do that. And if we were required by some legislation to make it popular, it would be very, very difficult to do because you couldn't do it with the same intention or the same thing, which leaves its path on this. And this would be, of course, relatively easy to copy, but you could not copy it with the same gestures that you copy that. It's just not possible because we enter into the gesture, we enter into the thing. And not only us, this is a thing which is not species specific at all, because, I mean, cut it out, Dan. Knows gesture. See, if I do like that, it will go away. I mean, they read gestures. Animals, all animals do. It's one of our best and easiest ways of communicating with them is through the whole gesture of the body and the whole whatever it is that you're saying through the movements that you make, and they read that perfectly well. You know, they have no trouble with it, and we have no trouble with reading it. We have some when it gets very difficult, because to enter into, actually to empathize with anything requires a great acuteness, and we can make terrible mistakes and believe that something, feel that something is something, which it isn't. And I had one great empathic triumph in my life, which was that when they had that $64,000 question, I kept saying he's cheating. And I can tell by his gestures that he's cheating, because he's doing what students that cheat do. They try to look as though they're thinking. And this is very difficult to do. It's not easy to talk about just telling one thing from another. It's not easy to tell whether they're thinking or they're simply in a daze, you know, or they're about falling asleep. But he made all of the false gestures of thinking about something, almost like, let me think, you know, almost a caricature of him. And I kept saying, you know, that I knew that it was cheating, and then sure enough it was. Didn't surprise me. I mean, it didn't horrify or scandalize me, but it seemed to be quite obvious. And then only quite recently I had a severe correction of my capacities to empathize, because when I saw Hannah, the big black dog, when she was only 3 weeks old, I went into her house where people lived, and she stood up as well as she could, which was, tottery and little, and tried to bark at me. And I thought, now there's a brave dog. Well, of course, it turned out that it was cowardice and nothing else. She's been a complete coward ever since, so she's getting over it a little bit now. That's her trick. Yes, Hannah, we know. But it turned out that not only was she a coward, her mother was a coward. I know 3 of her litter mates, and they are all roaring cowards. Coldness, or shyness, and so on. Things that it's hard to get real comprehension. So that gift of ours, a combination of our power to symbolize and our power to experience gesture or form, keep us constantly alert to and caring about arts. But I think the thing that is difficult for people to understand now, and it is terribly, I believe, terribly important for people to understand, particularly people who make anything, and that is that the art, the making of things, is so much an enormous power of ours that it's in the 10 Commandments. Now, I have, of course, have known the 10 Commandments for a long time, but I never thought until this year that the art is right up there with adultery, and with blasphemy, and with bearing false witness, and with not honoring your parents. It's a thing of terrible power, and if you abuse it and you don't follow it, you bring disaster down on everything. So it is of that, and then the other thing, you see, is the 10 Commandments that Moses, if it was Moses, recognized that we as human beings are going to do terrible things a lot of the time, and there's no stopping us. I mean, there's no stopping us. It doesn't do simply to say, one time to somebody, don't commit adultery. That doesn't do any good at all, you see, because they may not even have the chance then, so you're nowhere. But the recognition is that these things you are very apt to do, not only you, but the whole human race, and that there's a great likelihood that they'll keep on doing it, and they've got to know that this is wrong, but that it destroys love, and it is a whole thing of great evil. And the same thing is true, you see, of the actual existence of the thing that says, do not make yourself any graven image or bow down and worship it. Because the maker of God and Moses and the great centuries of recognition of what people like knows that we will make a graven image. We will make a graven image. We cannot not do it, and that's it's just something that people are bound to do. And then the question is, will they bow down and worship it? And the likelihood will be that they will, because it's such an extraordinary power. You see, the thing that making a graven image does is bring into the world the visible, actual thing, which before that was invisible, and in really essentially in another world. So that whatever you make as a person making graven images is going to be something which is which shows what has been invisible, no matter what that is, but it gives the invisible an incarnate, an actual physical existence. And this is the excitement and the terror of trying to make something, because you have in your mind, and everybody, has in their mind, say, a sunset. I mean, if you say sunset, people think, whatever they think. But if you intend to actually incorporate or make visible a sunset, you have a terrible time. Because the invisible always exceeds the visible. It's always bigger, and you always feel, but that is not it. That isn't it. I didn't get it. And everybody has this feeling, see, because what you're doing really is impossible. It's impossible, because what you're trying to do is to bring to the earth and to the physical world things which originate and really have their endurance in an invisible. And so when you bring that down, and if you have any kind of success with it, that is, if you can incorporate just even a relatively small part, a sense of the living actuality of the thing, this is practically throws you to your knees. And in fact, when you see a very great work of art, you know where you're affected, and not just me, I know other people have told me, in their knees. That your knees begin to give way. That it's a kind of crumbling of the tower to stand erect in that presence. So it is a continuing and living danger, and there is no question. Now, and again, our great purely species-specific thing is our need for and love of something which we think is extraordinary and greater than ourselves, and something where our knees give up. And that's what we all, we cannot not long for, because it's a recognition of something which is of very great power and actually beyond us, and yet we seem to be able to participate in it, at least for a while. And this is what any great work of art does. Now, I have, and I know that some of you are familiar with this, but I decided that the only thing to do about deciding whether something is a work of art or not is to make a law. And my law is that anything and everything made by a human being can be a work of art, is a work of art. And anything and everything made by anything else is not. So I just, I hope I've justified this enough to make you feel that it isn't purely arbitrary.
It doesn't narrow it down very much.
Well, it's so, and the reason that what we make is art is because we judge it. And this is, and nobody else is doing that. Well, my great admiration, the bowerbirds, Australian bowerbirds, come as close as you could ask, because they have a wonderful system of making a bower for the ladies, the gentlemen that do it. And they come back from their migrations 2 or 3 weeks before the ladies come. And in that time, they build a bower and that is they make a path to a nest, and the path they ornament with very elaborately, and then you see they do this great thing, and I don't know, just where they fit in, but it's all right with me since they do. And they stand back and look at it and think, oh, that's, that won't do. I mean, this is a great act, of making something. You look back and usually you think, oh, that's grand, at least for about 15 minutes. And then you begin to think, but maybe not quite so grand as I thought, and you rethink the whole thing. Well, that's what the bowerbirds are doing. You see, they stand back and think, oh, how grand, and then they think, oh no, and they go and change something. There's a little bright thing here. They make it up out of stones and bright things, and they go and put it over there. And then they stand and wait, and the ladies all parade by, and they are the art critics. You see, they come in and say, yes, this is very nice. A man that can do this is worthy of my love, and that's exactly what happens. So they when they find the bowerbird builder that is really superior, they move right in. And it's such an extraordinary thing. I know that there's a certain element of it in all of such things. The women always choose, the females always choose, and I remember reading about lady lobsters who sit in the window of where they live and beckon to people, beckon to other lobsters that are walking around, gentlemen lobsters, and if they see one that they think is really, pretty good-looking lobster, they tell him to come in. It's very sweet, and I think it's prevented me from ever eating a lobster. Any creature that has that, that discrimination and that power to sit there and choose I have too much respect for it to eat it. So I hope I've stopped all of you from ever eating lobsters.
That would be a sacrifice.
But that is it is in judgment and selection and choice, because we know that when we look at anything that's made by a human being, we know that it was made only through choice. That it was choosing this. It might be choosing because the other isn't any good, or it's not very good and the other is not very good, but you have to choose. And at the present time, the painter or sculptor or printmaker or dressmaker or anybody that's making anything, including anything, has to make choices, and there is no way around it. It has to be done, and it cannot come into existence except through choice. And this is the thing which is, of course, both the anguish and the delight, because choice always means that something cannot happen, that it is excluded. And it means that it is actually a series of exclusions that finally result in this. And and that's painful, because the choice is not made between something which is marvelous and something which is no good. The choice is made between two things which have certain equality between them. So you've got that. And this, again, you see, is a great joy of us as human beings, and it is also the great pain of us as human beings. And this is really what is meant by the idea that the making of works of art have an element of pain, an element of suffering, and an element of anguish of choices. I mean, no matter how, imagine the most frivolous person, the person who has the least sense of the seriousness of art. They still have to choose, and the choice is to a great extent still painful. It doesn't matter, you see, whether you have an elevated or an extraordinary or sensitive or sacred sense of what you're doing. If you're going to undergo the same things with or without. So it gives to the making of anything, a kind of seriousness, a kind of depth of seriousness that pain can give, and this has to be recognized, and it has to be something which is not confusable with the joy of making something. Because you see, they're both there. The joy, this again is absolutely ours. The joy of making something, the joy of choosing, the joy of seeing something come into being, being right there, after it's only been thought about, is just an extraordinary joy. But it's accompanied by really anguish. The pain of choice, and the pain of our always inadequacy, because we cannot do it. We cannot do it, and yet we can approach it. So this is nothing to do with the idea of art as fun and great pleasure and just something you should do so you can express yourself. All of these are disastrous ideas. You simply everybody has to be at war with those ideas. I'm going to just show you a couple of slides that if here Dr. Bruce will turn these lights on. Turn these lights on.
Is that what these are?
No, out there. I think. Oh, that's it.
The other one.
Yeah, I want to just show you Roy Lichtenstein's painting, because he has just come here now. That's a good one. Thank you. When he did these things, which are taken directly from comic books, they're done with Ben-Gay dots that make all these shadows and stuff, just as all the comic books are. And he copied them exactly. And of course, people, the first thing they said, is it art? And they said it, when he first did it, it was impossible for them to believe that this was art. And of course, it is the expansion of the idea of what can be art that makes me have this conviction that the only definition that you can make is that anything that we make is art, whatever that word might mean. It is, and that's what it is. And then, once you say that, you see, then you are absolutely obligated to make a judgment. You will make a judgment, but you're also obligated to make a judgment, a conscious judgment, in which you say, yes, it is art, but it's not much good. Or yes, it is art, but it's perfectly delightful, and I want to see more of it. That the recognition that anything made by a human being absolutely requires that you then make a judgment. And this is hard for people to do because they think the word art means that that's wonderful. And the last thing I want to say to you is the people who say, I'm going to make an art of life. Well, it's perfectly impossible, for one thing, and it's highly undesirable for another thing. And it defeats both life and art to do that, to say that. Anything which is suitable for art is not suitable for life. Any action that's suitable in life is not suitable in art. Think of the statue of somebody, and you say to it, "Have a nice day." Now, on the other hand, suppose that you start dusting your friends. You see, you've got to recognize that these actions are suited to the situation, and they cannot be interchanged. And it's exactly the same. It's the whole principle on which art stands, is that it is not like life, and that it cannot be, but it has to be like life. This is the paradox in which it's made. If it isn't anything like life, we're not remotely interested in it. We can't be, after all. And if it is too much, if there's a confusion, then again, neither can really function. Neither can function. So that if you are in your house and a burglar comes in and you yell, "Help, help," that's suitable to life. If you're on a stage and the burglar comes in, you must not, sitting there in the audience, say, "Get the police." You are confusing art and life, and this is disastrous. And so it is I want you to know that it is an instrument of enormous power which we have been granted and which we can always abuse, because we are given the freedom to do that. And that it is something which has to be recognized for being its great power for good and for evil. Thank you very much. That's enough. Now, and I want you to ask me questions if you want. Whatever. We put lights on and see. We don't get to see a slide, but we'll see it next time. So, I don't want to keep you sitting on not always terribly comfortable chair. Did anything that I say, was anything not clear? That's all I want to know, is whether I made it clear. And if you have a deep reservation about it, I'm interested to hear that, but I will destroy it immediately.
Mary, how do you deal with breaking that commandment all the time about thou shalt not make?
Which one?
How do you deal with, what do you do about thou shalt not make a graven image? What do you do about thou shalt not make a graven image?
Oh, well, I intend to talk about that next time. What I do about it is, well, there's one thing which is very interesting that used to be a general saying in the Middle Ages when there were, this great rush of the creation of all kinds of images. I mean, just enormous, and the images, lots of them taking on perfect extraordinary powers, healing people and doing all kinds of things. But they were ubiquitous everywhere. They were. But at that time, there was a saying that the maker of images never worships them. It's the other people. Because, you see, they know what it took to make. And they know that though they have something beyond themselves that aids us as it does in every situation, and of course more specifically aids us when the choices are difficult or when the things are complicated and difficult for us to do. And everybody that makes anything recognizes that they're not the only agent of making this thing. That there is something else, and if they don't tap into that, they know that it's dead. So it doesn't live. It's just dead. It may be decorative and charming, all kinds of things, but it doesn't live. And and anyone who makes anything knows about that. But the person who makes an image makes it, and particularly at that time, they make it with a reverence, a certain reverence, and sense that what they're doing is serious work. But they are themselves not so apt because anything we do is always somewhat disappointing. And maybe the most marvelous things are the worst. I've been just absolutely haunted by the fact that Virgil, tried to burn the Aeneid when he was on his deathbed. Because he said it's such a lousy poem. And a lot of subsequent Latin scholars going right along, but they don't have the opportunity because people prevented him from doing it. They stopped him from doing it. But he wanted. It was just too weak to do it. And who else, of all things, St. Thomas Aquinas? He tried to struggle up from his deathbed to burn the Summa, which would have been cutting a lot of ground out from under a lot of people for the next 400 or 500 years. But he said it's not it. It's not it. And this is, I think a great human thing, in that you experience it best when you're trying to make something. That you can experience it all the time in all kinds of ways, and you want to say, this is not it. But when you make something, you know it's not it if you make it with any seriousness. If you make it with any desire for it to take its place in a serious world. So we all are going to suffer from it. And I mean, it's just so extraordinary. Think of the other people who did burn their things, who did burn. And he was already famous, but he didn't. Of course, he had his eye on Homer, and you can't afford to do that. It's what Bruce said. Don't worry about not being Moses. Worry about not being St. Thomas Aquinas. And not believing enough in St. Thomas Aquinas to preserve his work. So that's I think we should go and have something nibbly or a glass of wine or something.